talking about technical advancements in wine blending. So this is less about advancements in wine blending, I would say, and more about advancements in oxidation protection, shelf life improvement, how to keep your bulk wine drinkable, let's say. This is an awkward picture of me. I don't think we need to do that. I work for Enartis. If you're unfamiliar with Enartis, Enartis is one of the largest, if not the largest, enological supply companies. We have branches all over the world, and I work here in the US, and I manage the corporate accounts, so I work with the really large groups that buy and sell lots of bulk wine. We taste lots of bulk wine together, and we figure out how to make it the best it can be. So like I said, the overarching need I hear right now when I'm tasting with winemakers and bulk suppliers is not about how to add tannins or polysaccharides or gums, how to increase the value of the wine. That's not necessarily what is the most valuable thing. I think right now we need to talk about how to maintain the quality. So the suppliers of bulk wine want the samples to show at tasting. We don't know how long some bulk samples have been sitting on the shelf. So when they get to the winery and you're in the tasting lab and tasting the wines, we need those wines to show well in order for someone to want to buy them, right? So I want to talk about how to keep the wines at their best. And so we'll discuss oxidation, microbial stability, and colloidal stability. So first up is oxidation. So again, imagine we're in this like imaginary sensory lab tasting wines. The first thing you do is smell, right? If that wine has any fault at all, if it's oxidized, if it smells like mousy, like lactobacillus, if there's any faults, it's not making it to the tasting. They're gonna cap the bottle, move along, and that's not gonna be a bulk wine that anybody buys. So we have to prevent that from happening. So oxidation, simply put, is the interaction of metals, specifically copper and iron, with oxygen, and that results in aldehydic aromas. And so since oxygen is always present in winemaking, and metals are inherent in the winemaking process. They're in the grapes, and unless they're removed during vinification, which I would not consider to be common practice, they're going to be present in the resulting wine. Metals can be removed during fermentation. You can use PVI, PVP, which in our brand is called Stable Met, to remove metals. You can use ketazan to remove metals. But again, it's not common practice. It's not something that people do during winemaking routinely. So we can just assume that metals will be present in the finished wine. And if the wine was treated for reduction with copper, then it's definitely there. And so we have metals no matter what. And then as you can see, these are some of the different movements of wine during the winemaking and bottling process. And so oxygen is always present. Pumping, filtration, transport, these are obviously pretty prevalent in the bulk wine process. So the metals exist and the oxygen exists. So how do we prevent the oxidation and the aldehydic aromas from happening? And now it's kind of sales pitch time. Hideki. This is one of our innovative products that we sell. So what is Hideki? So Hideki is the most antioxidant and bacteriostatic tannin on the market. It's a blend of 3 different types of tannin that come from 3 different origin materials. It's gallic, ellagic, and epigallocatechin galate. And so these 3 tannins together, you're laughing like I practiced that one. Well, it's a nutrition thing. I don't know if you see EGCG, if you're into supplementing. It's a powerful antioxidant catechin. So this is something we created recently, and this is what it does. So this was a finishing trial that we were doing, and on a bulk wine, as we poured the sample and it sat on the counter to do the tanning trial, it oxidized. And obviously, so the wine on the right is treated with Hideki, the wine on the left is untreated. So we can't really do a finishing trial on an oxidized wine and get an accurate representation of what it's going to be like. So we dose these wines with just 0.75 grams per hectoliter of Hideki and left them on the counter overnight to test them the next day. As you can see, the wine on the right, it looks beautiful. We can blend that. We can add finishing products to make it better. The wine on the left is not an option. Nobody's buying that. So Hideki will prevent the oxidation from happening, and then in many cases, it actually can reverse oxidation, not to this dramatic an effect, but it will reduce browning. So Hideki, here's some ways to use it. SO2 reduction, tanks with ullage, bulk wine transport, refresh oxidized wine, and then for bottling. So one little fact that I skipped over on this last slide. So using SO2, it is dependent upon pH, right? I think we all know that. So the higher the pH, the less effective the SO2. Since this is a tannin and it's not SO2, it is not affected by pH. So if you add 2.5 grams per hectoliter of Hideki to a wine, no matter what the pH, it's going to be the same effect of 10 ppm of SO2. So that's not only exciting, in my opinion, for oxidation, but also when we think about bulk wine transport, there are limits on free and total SO2 that are allowed for exporting to and importing into the US market. And so what I hear a lot about bulk wine is that the frees tend to be pretty low, but the totals are really, really high. So you get to a point when you can't add any more SO2. So what are you going to do to prevent oxidation and still have a wine that has shelf life? So you can use something like Hideki. So again, back to this. I mean, just imagine, yes, you can use it to treat the oxidation, but if any time there's wine movement, imagine just like 1-2 grams per hectoliter adding Hideki to a wine, like the quality implications, the preservation of quality that we could have. Not only is Hideki antioxidant, but it also has bacteriostatic properties, which what that means is it won't cure a microbial stability issue in wine, but it will prevent any bloom from happening. So let's add my last little, hold on, boop. There we go. So it can prevent malolactic fermentation from happening or acetic acid bacteria growth, and it will risk of bottling plant contamination. Oof, I stole this slide from somewhere else. Yeah, that. So that brings me to our next topic, microbial stability. So again, antioxidant protection, important. We're in the imaginary tasting lab, we're tasting a wine, it's oxidized, it's out. Also, if there's any microbial faults, that wine's getting kicked out of the tasting too. So here are some of the most common microbial issues that we find in wine. Fermentative yeast, so these are film yeasts, Brett, acetic acid bacteria, lactic acid bacteria, they all have faults associated with them, organoleptic faults. So historically speaking, there weren't a lot of ways to treat these faults in wine. We had sterile filtration to remove them, still a risk of a bloom or a population growth after that. There was lysozyme, which was only effective against gram-negative bacteria, also derived from an allergen source. And with the huge push towards allergen-free winemaking, not really a viable option anymore. And then there was chetosan. And so chetosan was previously believed to, I feel funny saying this with all these Scott Lab people in the room. I'm getting sweaty. Chetosan was previously only believed to be effective against Brett. But now there's activated chetosan. And so here is a photo of standard chetosan versus Enardis's activated chetosan, which is, again, we all have a lot of the same stuff. Lots of people have activated chetosan now. But as you can see, there's a difference. So it's an acid hydrolysis process, and basically it increases the surface area of the chetosan, which increases the positive charge. So everything in wine that's bad has a negative charge. All of our finding agents have positive charges. So when we have more positive charge, we remove more of the bad stuff. And then this is what an activated chetosan product can do. These are just trials that we've run on multiple wines. So depending on what thing you're fighting against, Brettanomyces it's most effective against. So a low dosage rate of about 5 grams per hectoliter can significantly decrease your population, all the way up to Acetobacter, which is really challenging to combat in wine. Again, that's a gram-positive bacteria, so there was nothing that we could use before other than sterile filtration to fight Acetobacter. So, as you can see, one product, Ketosan, or for us, Stab Micro M, which is derived not from an allergen, it's not from shellfish, it's derived from fungus, is effective against all of these different microbial spoilage organisms. We fixed the oxidation in the wine. We've killed all the bad stuff that lives in there. We've prevented it from growing. So now we have a perfect bulk wine that we're ready to sell, and it's going to be bottled, and we can move on with our lives, right? Well, almost. Last up is colloidal stability. Colloidal stability specifically, I'm talking about cold stability and color stability. So crystal precipitation, cold stability. So in the bulk wine world, you don't have to sell your bulk wine as cold stable. But if we think back to that chart about all the moments when oxygen introduced into wine can cause challenges. Cold stability is one of the moments when oxygen is most damaging because the dissolution of oxygen is higher at lower temperatures. So when we think about chilling a wine down for 2 to 3 weeks at 30 degrees, the amount of oxygen that goes into the wine, we can easily reach oxygen saturation, and then again, we have an oxidized wine that's difficult to sell and blend. So, and this has been a challenge for a long time, and winemakers have known that cold stability is a challenging moment in the winemaking process. So for 40 years, we've been trying to find alternatives to avoid the stability process to reduce the risk of wine quality loss. So at first, it was these subtractive physical techniques where it was just cold stability. You would use resins to run it through like a VA filtration type system, electrodialysis, and then we moved into the additive method, metatartaric acid, gum arabic, manoproteins, and CMC. But the most recent, and I would say most advanced technology is KPA, potassium polyaspartate. It is an additive colloidal stabilizer. Here we go, solution based on KPA. You can use it on white, red, and rosé wines. For red wine application, Zenith is better than some other older technologies simply because it doesn't actively destabilize color, whereas CMCs, it can pull color out of suspension. So Zenith can be used on red, white, rosé, whereas with other products you have to be a little bit more careful. The dosage is singular, 100 mils per hectoliter. It treats any wine for tartaric stabilization. And there's all kinds of other implications as well as to why this is beneficial versus standard cold stability. You use less energy, you create less gray water waste, and in the end, it's a liquid additive product, so you're making more wine, there's less wine loss, you have more product to sell that is stable. So although you don't necessarily have to sell your bulk wine as a cold, stable bulk wine, there's lots of benefits to doing it that way. I had a call from a really big customer of mine who was getting, I think, like 4 truckloads of Pinot Noir from South Africa, of all places, and they had to bottle it in 2 days. And she called me freaking out. She didn't have a solution. She didn't know what to do. And so simply with 100 mils per hectoliter of Zenith, we were able to stabilize the wine the day it arrived and bottle it the next day with no issue whatsoever. So it's just a really simple, time-sensitive solution for cold stability. And that's it, just those 3 things. And then I know in the bulk wine world, everything is all about price per gallon. So in terms of treatment, if you wanted to use any of these solutions, if you wanted to use all of them, in fact, you could add all of these for less than $1 per gallon of treatment. Simply to do cold stabilization, you're looking at 7 cents a gallon. To treat a microbial population, you're looking at less than 40 cents a gallon. Or Hideki for antioxidant, every time a wine is moved to just ensure that you're not going to have oxidation issues, you're looking at 1 cent per gallon. So these are just really reasonable priced solutions, I think, that can have a big impact on overall wine quality in the long term.
For shipping, like I know you just said with that friend of yours, it sounded like you treated it once and it arrived. Should she have treated it with it before it shipped from South Africa to help stabilize it?
No, it wouldn't stabilize more or less necessarily. The effect is going to be the same across the board. It's completely filterable, so you can add it any time in the winemaking process. Realistically, we're actually one of my colleagues in England. She's partnered with one of the largest bulk wine exporters in the UK, and they use Zenith on all of the wine. So they ship the wine unstabilized, and when it arrives, they do one dose, the standard dose of the Zenith, and it's stable for bottling within the next week. They bottle everything. If I would add Hideki before transport, though. If you were going to use the tannin, the antioxidant tannin, that would be a pre-transport. But for Zenith, for cold stability, it doesn't matter. Any moment in the process. Mm-hmm.
The Hideki, have you used it for non-alc?
I think people have done trials on it with non-alc. I personally haven't, no. But there are things to consider. Are we talking white wine or red wine? Both? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sparkling wine, there's definitely, you would want to go with lower dosages because of the risk of reduction, aromatic reduction, right? But no, you could use it on anything. We've had a lot of success in the low and no alcohol wine sector with gum arabics that are rich in serine. They're a little bit different than some of the other common gum arabics on the market. This gum arabic, this serine is an amino acid that actually produces the perception of sweetness on the palate. So I think it's 50 mils per hectoliter equates to sensorially what 5 grams of residual sugar tastes like. But yeah, if you're looking for antioxidant protection, I don't see why not. 2 hours. As long as you can turn the tank 1.5 times. No, it's a liquid product, but it has SO2 content in it, so it is microbially stable. You add it post final filtration, it's no problem. We also have a whole branch of our business called Enartis Engineering, and so that is equipment that goes along with our products to support our products. And so if you were concerned about microbial or adding something post-final filtration, you could easily, we could support you by giving you a dosing pump. Just like people dose Velcorin in line before bottling, we can dose gums and Zenith and all kinds of products in line before bottling to keep it a closed system. Some gums, they are not filterable. Zenith is completely filterable through sterile. Hi. Thanks. It does have to be protein stable. So it's similar to CMC. When CMC came on the market, we were one of the few companies that was really pushing not just protein stability, but colloidal stability. So I believe when we talk about protein stability, unstable proteins live in that 32 to 40 kilodalton range. But when we're using a colloid stabilizer, since it is such a strong charge, it expands that range of colloids that it can pull out of suspension to create that haze. And so CMC, I don't know the exact numbers of those kilodaltons, but it can pull more out of suspension. With Zenith, it still needs to be heat stable and colloid stable, but it is significantly less reactive with the colloids.
Follow up to that question. I've used CMC in the past and seen it take a wine that was borderline protein stable, and then you add the CMC and then it fails a heat stability test. Does KPA show that same? If it's, let's say you're at greater than or 2 TU for heat stability and you add KPA, will it then affect that protein haze formation?
It would force the interaction to happen. So it does have to be stable. Our parameter is below 2 NTU, just like for heat stability. But the way we do it is when you have your little 30 mil turbidity flasks, we dose one of them with the Zenith, and we do the other one undosed, and that would effectively be your heat stability versus your colloid stability. And if the one dosed with Zenith is above the 2 NTU, then typically all you have to do is add an extra quarter pound, half a pound of bentonite to get it stabilized. We actually have a few bentonites in our range that are specific to Zenith. It's called Clairol ZW and Clairol ZR. So yes, they do have to be a little bit more than protein stable, and the addition will force an interaction.